Hi there and welcome back to my channel. If you haven't been here before, then my name is Abigail and I make videos aimed at helping you become a more intentional Christian parent. And I think that a great way to be more intentional as a parent is to read lots of books and to kind of absorb information from other parents. So today I'm going to be sharing with you my honest book review of the Montessori Toddler by Simone Davies. As most of you guys know, I have a 1-year-old son called Samuel, so he's getting into exactly the right age range for a book about toddlers, and I'm going to be doing a few more book reviews like this as well. So if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button down below and turn on the bell notifications so that you don't miss when I post a video. So I'm going to start off by giving you an overview of the book as a whole, and then you can just watch that if you just want kind of like an overall more summary of the book. And then I'm going to go in depth a little bit later on into the book, and I'm going to show you some of the illustrations and some of the pages as well if you want a more in-depth kind of review. So stick around for that if you want, but I'm going to start off with like an overall summary. What I would say at the start is that I don't know a lot about Montessori as a concept. I'm like a beginner amateur to the concept, although I have subscribed to a couple of YouTube channels around Montessori. So I'm kind of a beginner, but I have a vague general idea of what Montessori is. So starting off with the target audience. The target audience of this book, the target market for this book is parents with young children, either toddler age or babies that are going to go into toddler age, and also people that are expecting a baby as well. I think if you fit into this category, then you will get something from this book. I would especially recommend this book if you want to move away from having endless amounts of like plastic toys in your house, if you're kind of over that, and you want to move to a more minimalistic, maybe more open-ended wooden toys kind of idea, then I would recommend this, and also if you want to move away from a lot of screen time for your child. This book is very accessible, even if you haven't ever heard of Montessori before. If you have no idea what Montessori is, then stick around and you'll kind of understand a bit better by the end of this video. But if you have no idea what it is, then this book is still very accessible. It explains to you what it is, and it's a very good like starter book if you want to get into Montessori, but you've never heard of it before. So the first thing that I would say is that I love the meatiness of this book. So I refer to like the meatiness of books quite a lot in book reviews because for me it's quite an important thing. Like for me, a book has to have a lot of information in it. Like it has to have a lot of substance and like depth and detail, and for me this book has that. This is one of those books that I will keep and that I will read again and that I will refer to again farther down the line as my son gets older. The illustrations in the book and also the photographs are very, very beautiful, very Montessori style-esque, and very, like the photographs are very like pleasing to the eyes. I'll just give you an example of this. So throughout the book there's loads of illustrations like this, like tiny little very simplistic style illustrations, and then they also have photographs. So this is one of the pages with the photograph. So as you can see, it's very beautiful to look at, very stunning, and I really love that about this book. Most of the advice, the tips, the things in this book, I would say in my opinion do fit in with a Christian family very well. There's one or two things in it that I maybe would not necessarily recommend for Christian households, but it's like a very small section or two, and the overall idea of this is very, very like, I think it fits in very well with Christian values. One of the negative things I would say about this book is that because it was so meaty and had so much information packed into it, it can sometimes feel a bit overwhelming reading it with like the sheer amount of information that's in the book. So I would suggest taking notes as you go along, and the author does try and kind of help you with this by giving you handy tables and stuff towards the end of the book as well. So they do try to alleviate the overwhelmingness of the book, but I would say that it is still quite an overwhelming book in some places and some of the details. If you are looking for a toddler book about tantrums and dealing with behaviour and setting limits and all those kind of things, which I know a lot of people will be looking for at around this age, then I wouldn't say necessarily just to buy this book, because it does go into this in 1 or 2 chapters, it does go into those kind of things, but I wouldn't say this is the best book out there if that's specifically what you're looking for. I think there are other better options out there. But if you are looking for a book that shows you how to help your toddler become more independent, do more things for themselves, and create engaging, minimalistic activities, then this is a book for you. And I also think you would like this book if you're into more of a gentle / respectful / positive parenting kind of outlook. So for my brief end to the summary, like the short summary at the start of this video, I would say that I do recommend this book. It's not for everyone, but I highly enjoyed it. I think I'll be referring to it in the future. It's of course the same with every book that you're not going to use every single concept you find within the book, but you're going to use a few things. And I would say that if you are a parent with young children, then yes, this book is a good book. You should pick it up. It's very interesting and you will get something from it. So moving on to a more in-depth discussion of the book, I'm going to start off with chapter 1, which is a general introduction. It's all about viewing toddlers in a more positive way and just viewing them in a different way than you maybe would in general in society. So in society you maybe think of the terrible twos or like tantrums when you think of toddlers, but here it's thinking about all the kind of positive things about them and viewing them in a more positive light. And it talks about things that toddlers need. For example, toddlers need to move. I especially liked page 9 of the first chapter, which is all about, it's entitled Toddlers Are Brilliant, and it's basically talking about how toddlers most of the time aren't trying to be naughty, they're just trying to express themselves and communicate. So for example, this one says, what looks like a battle of wills is actually your toddler learning that things don't always go their way. And it has it set out in this like nice kind of table format here. So I really enjoyed this first chapter. It makes a really nice general introduction to the book. Okay, chapter 2 is for you if you don't know what Montessori is. If you've never heard of Montessori, you don't know who Dr. Montessori was, this chapter is for you because it goes into that and it explains it a bit. It goes through how Montessori is different from other learning approaches like traditional learning methods, and it also goes into the different Montessori principles that there are. So for example, one of the Montessori principles is hands-on concrete learning. And then another thing it goes through is like sensitive periods for toddlers, which is essentially just when a toddler shows a really intense interest in one certain thing at a time. So for example, they go through a really big interest in like running around and moving a lot, or they're really interested in learning language. And it talks about that as well, and that's one of the main focuses of Montessori. And then it talks about freedom and limits, independence, the unconscious absorbent mind, which I'm not going to go into, and respect. So it goes through all these kind of basic foundational pillars of Montessori. And at the end of each chapter they have a really handy to practice section. So they have a box here and you can see it says to practice, and it asks you questions. So it kind of helps you to stimulate your thinking about what you've just been reading. So I think that's really helpful as well to have that at the end of each chapter. Chapter 3 is Montessori activities for toddlers, and this is my favourite chapter of the book. This is the reason that I bought the book, and I really like that it's near the start of the book as well. This is mostly what I had seen of Montessori before, and it's again why I wanted to buy the book, and it was what attracts a lot of people to Montessori is the different activities that they have. So it shows you from start to end of how to create and show a child a Montessori activity. So another one with beautiful pictures, one of the pages here, it shows you examples of Montessori activities, and yeah, I just really like the photos in this book. I find them really helpful to give you a visual understanding of what they're talking about. I really love the table setting idea. So it's basically you just get like a little placemat and you draw around your fork and your bowl and everything, and it helps your child to be able to set the table themselves because they know where each different thing could go. So I really like that idea. The book then goes through all the different types of activities that you could prepare for your child. At the end of the book as well, they have like a condensed table of this, which I think is really helpful. And in those tables, they also have general like age ranges, which that really helps to kind of help you understand where your child will likely be at around that age. Because there is so much information in the book, it's nice to have age guides so that you can know like which ones to kind of focus on at which age. It then goes into practical life activities, which is a big Montessori thing, and it's essentially just things you do in your day-to-day life and helping your toddler to do them. So for example, brushing your teeth, setting the table, watering plants, all these different ideas. And then it moves on to an arts and crafts section and a language section. One of the things I liked in the arts and crafts section was explaining how you should talk to your child about their art, which I found really, really helpful, because you unconsciously maybe don't say the thing that's most helpful for your child. So the example that it gives is when your child shows you a picture and you say, oh, that's lovely, what is it? And it shows you that maybe it's not meant to be anything, maybe it's just meant to be squiggles on a page. And so it's better to kind of commentate more and say, oh, I see you drew a red circle, something like that. So I really find that really helpful, and the way that it shows you how to give feedback to your child. And then there is a beautiful 5 pages which is just illustrations, like photographs of what they've just talked about, which again I find it really helpful to put pictures to data. So this is the practical life one. It shows you like the wee cooking implements and a wee mirror and brush, and yeah, again I think the way this book is set out is really good. Chapter 4 is how to set up your home Montessori style. This is one of those sections that I find overwhelming with detail, because there's just so much text and so much that I haven't implemented in my life or in my house that if I want to follow Montessori principles I should be implementing, but there's just so much that I find it overwhelming. So this is one of those sections that I do find overwhelming. It also has a home tour section at the end which shows you different people's homes that follow the Montessori principles, and again photographs are stunning. So this shows you like a area when you're going to leave the house, how they've set it up, and it also shows you like a kitchen drawer set up for an older child, an outdoor space. Like these pictures give me more inspiration than a lot of the rest of the book, because it just helps you to have a visual idea, you know. The next chapter is talking about how to encourage curiosity in your child and how to show them that you accept them for who they are. So this is ideas like go slow, so like slow down in your daily life, and help me to help myself, which is all about growing the toddler's independence. Also, on a side note, if you like quotes, which I really do like quotes, I think they're very inspirational. If you like quotes, then this book is full of them, from Dr. Montessori herself or just other people that follow these principles. I love quotes, so I thought that was worth mentioning. And then towards the end of chapter 5, it does talk briefly about discipline and how to implement limits. At the end of this chapter is one of those parts that I wouldn't say is necessarily super Christian. It's basically talking about roles and labels, and basically we shouldn't label our child or tell them who they are, which I don't think is such a Christian concept, because as Christian parents we should be telling our kids they do have an identity in Jesus and as children of God. So that's not necessarily the most Christian concept, I don't think, but it's only like a 2-page spread and it's still got some like interesting things to read on it. So that's the only thing I would say about that. Chapter 6 is called Nurturing Cooperation and Responsibility in Our Child, and it's all about how to discipline your child. Now this section will not be for everyone. It's very against any kind of hitting, shouting, any kind of punishment at all, which not necessarily going to be for everyone, but again is a very interesting read. It gives great tips on how to avoid tantrums, how to manage tantrums. And I especially like the part that talks about how you should allow your child to have negative emotions and feelings, and that they should be able to express them. I massively agree with the whole concept of something small in your eyes is something huge in your child's eyes. Like your child not being able to use their favourite spoon one day is like a massive disaster to them. And I think we shouldn't belittle that or just kind of brush it aside, but we should be acknowledging this and allowing their negative feelings. And that's what this chapter goes into a bit as well. Now chapter 7 starts talking about routines. This is not my favourite chapter, mainly because there's a bit of repetition in it. Like a lot of the things that I've talked about in the previous chapters are kind of like also in this chapter, just the information is just presented in a slightly different way, which could be helpful for some. I didn't find it massively helpful because I felt like I could draw the lines between the dots myself. For example, the practical life section from earlier is kind of just repeated here, talking about eating and sleeping and drinking, and yeah, I just felt it was a bit repetitive. It also talks about different types of behaviour in children. So a more introverted child, it talks about hitting stages or biting stages, when your child's being clingy and when they're frustrated. The next chapter is about how to act as the adult. So this is about being the child's guide, being honest. It's lots of advice that I've heard in lots of other places. It also touches on self-care, so like quite a lot of basic information. I don't necessarily feel like I need this chapter. Yeah, make of that what you will. The next chapter touches on the extended family, different caregivers that your child might come into contact with, and kind of covers briefly how you deal with those people that don't necessarily follow your exact way of thinking. I like the part where it talked about how you should acknowledge your family's feelings and kind of translate for them. So don't necessarily be like, don't shout at my child to their grandparents. Just be like, oh, I think grandpa doesn't want you to climb on the furniture. I think grandma doesn't want you to do this or that. I thought that was kind of helpful concept from that section. Chapter 10 is all about the different planes of development of the child. So in Montessori they have different kind of ages of the child and what how they're learning in these different stages. So from like 0 to 6 years, and then 6 to 9 years, and then it goes all the way up to 24, because in Montessori you're still a child until you're 24, which is controversial I guess, but there you go. It also talks about getting ready for school, whether that's a Montessori school or otherwise. And now we're on to the last wee section, which is just like the appendices at the end. The first one is real stories, which I love this section. I think it adds a huge amount of value and weight to the rest of the book to see actually how the principles are played out in practice. So it kind of gives different stories of people that act out the Montessori in their lives. And of course, again, stunning photographs, which I adore these kind of things, as you know by now, because I've talked about it endlessly. But again, yeah, just adds a lot of weight and value to the book. And then you've got a kind of more random culmination of information. It's got a couple of tables like I talked about at the start that condenses some of your information. There's a table that says instead of this, say that, which I find is actually quite a useful, helpful guide to go by. So as you go along, you can like refer to this. So for example, one of them says, it's talking about sharing, and it says, do we, instead of forcing them to share, like give them a turn now, you say that it looks like they're playing with it right now, it'll be available soon. So it gives you kind of alternative ways to say things. And then finally we have a long list of Montessori activities split up into the age range. So what I can see myself doing with this is going to the relevant age for my child, which is the first stage at the moment, which is 1, and picking an activity to do for my child that day, setting it up for them and following it through using the methods talked about in this book. And again, this does help make the information easier to digest. So that's my overall review of the Montessori Toddler by Simone Davies. I would say that I do recommend this book. I really enjoyed it, and I can see myself referring to it quite a lot in the future. So I would recommend you buying it if you are pregnant or you've got a young child, or you're expecting to have young children in the future. I would recommend this. You will probably get something out of it. Maybe not so much if you already heard of Montessori and you know what it is, but it's still a really stunning book, and the photographs will probably give you some really great ideas, and the activities at the back will also give you some extra ideas that you might not have thought of. So I would highly recommend this book. And yes, I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe down below and leave me a comment letting me know if you've read this book or if you're looking to pick it up. And I will see you in my next video. Bye.